that. And I wish the best team to win, but also this is really for the purposes. As my feedback will show you, I am more interested in the development of the speaker to making sure you ground your voice. But also, winning is not a bad idea. But I'm more interested in your growth. So you purpose to, I know a couple of us have done multiple rounds, and my advice would be for each spar have like a goal as tiny as it can get. I want to impact on my argument. I want to have a closing statement. I want to have an opening statement. I want my stakeholder analysis to be thorough. I want my comparatives good. That way, you're able to achieve those goals. You're able to track whether you've been making progress. That said, each speaker is going to have 6 minutes of speaker time. I'm going to encourage you to time yourself, but I'll also be running a timer here. But please time yourself. And yes, we can have a first speaker of the proposition side to start the debate.
Okay, Chair. Can I confirm audibility?
Yes, you're very audible.
All right, so give me a few seconds to set my timer. Okay, so I'm going to start. Can I confirm I'm audible again?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. We currently stand in a world where absurd laws and baseless beliefs have transcended the confines of religious doctrine and tradition. As protagonists of morality, culture, and civility, we are proud to affirm. Chair, today's discussion is about whether it's justified for Uganda's Roman Catholic Church to secede from Vatican. But one thing we have to note and one clarity to note in the debate is that it isn't about whether blessings of same-sex marriage is right or wrong, but regardless, it's inherently bad. Things to note in our setup. One, we're going to things to show in our setup. One, we're going to show you why we think why we believe we would actually secede from from this Vatican as the Uganda Roman Catholic. But then two, we're going to show you reasons as to why. That is to uphold African identity. But then secondly, show you that there's significance of principle of responsibility and obligation towards believers. But then lastly, we're going to show you how we try to avoid the imperialistic tendencies at the end of the day, which is going to be shown to you by my throughout the government speech. But then first and foremost, setting the context of debate, right? One, we're going to show you the whole idea of Christianity, but then secondly, give you a brief coverage of what Vatican is, and then lastly, show you what the major definition of secede is. First and foremost, the coming of the contest on Christianity. First and foremost, Chair, we have to understand that Christianity came about into Africa or Uganda due to the coming of the explorers, right? We have to understand it was something that came into Uganda, and then what happened is that Ugandans decided to actually go ahead and adopt it. But then one thing we want to give you clarity is that this Christianity back in the days did not actually confide or probably did not respect the morals or the norms of the Ugandan people. But then what is Vatican in today's aspect, right? Vatican is the center, they call it the center of Christianity, where the Roman Catholic Church is actually based, and it's where the whole institutions are centered at the end of the day. But then seceding is basically withdrawing formally from a religious education, a religious organization at the end of the day. So going to characterization. First and foremost, we show you how Christianity comes into existence, and we show you that the back days of Christianity came about, these explorers coming and preaching to the Ugandans, and at the end of the day, they adopted it. And then we clearly tell you that this Christianity did not actually clash with the morals or the cultures of the people, but inherently went ahead to actually build up the Ugandans in various ways. So one thing you have to understand, Chair, that why do we like that? One thing you have to understand is that you have to understand the significance of religion in our country. Religion is something that actually goes ahead to shape our society, shape people's behavior and morality at the end of the day. So showing you that's showing the significance of religion, we show you that Uganda's Roman Catholic Church at the end of the day is very vital in like promoting these religious practices at the end of the day. So before I go into my argumentation, I'm going to take NPRI in 3, 2, 1. It's okay, I'll proceed. So, Chair, 3 arguments from our side. First, we're going to show you why, like, the first thing we want to show you as to why Uganda's Roman Catholic should withdraw formally is that it has to uphold the principle of responsibility and obligation towards the believers. But then, secondly, we are literally upholding the Ugandan identity in terms of culture and like upholding their morals and all sorts of that, right? But then, first thing foremost, in my speech, upholding there's principle of responsibility and obligation towards believers as the Roman Catholic Church. Chair, we have to understand that churches for so long have been a vital impact, or probably have played a vital role on how to influence people, shaping their behaviors and teaching people on what is right and wrong, right? But then, so why do we think this is actually true? 2 reasons. A, such areas have been able to shape lives of people by incorporating what the Bible teaches them, i.e., be faithful to one another, the 10 commandments such as don't steal, don't lie, etc. But then, secondly, churches have been the center of truth, to society. What does that mean? It means that whatever is portrayed in churches, in the picture or like in the eyes of the layman, it means that whatever ideally is like painted towards the people is actually very true. And that is why we think such institutions have a great responsibility and obligation towards believers. So, Chair, why we think we should actually withdraw is that once, like for example, if we have this event analysis and these people don't withdraw, we're going to see that this whole idea of indoctrination of such misleading beliefs in the society is going to actually come up. And then what is going to happen is that such policies and laws are going to be affected, and then people are actually going to go ahead. But then, Chair, why do we think that this argument is inherently important? 2 things. Due to the whole idea of obligation and more so, we show you that withdrawal will actually avoid issues of fostering such policies or laws, i.e. same-sex marriages actually look simple into the Uganda Roman Catholic churches. So what does that mean? It means that at a point in time, once these people actually withdraw, it means that these people are able to actually fulfill their responsibility and obligation and acknowledge that they have a significant role in playing, like they have a significant role towards the society. But then secondly, it inherently fulfills its responsibility by protecting their believers, exposing them to detrimental laws that affect the spiritual faith, right? At a point in time, you have been groomed from childhood that man and man is actually wrong. But at a point in time, once we see the picture in Roman Catholic churches, that what is going to happen, it's going to have clashes in people's minds, and then people are going to actually be in total confusion. And we don't think it's supposed to actually happen. But then, like these churches have to inherently fulfill their responsibility. At the end of that day, we think it's very important. Why? Because it is able to fulfill its necessary obligations and shape society. But then secondly, it's able to stand firm without manipulation, hence better religious grooming and strengthening faith accordingly. With that, I beg to rest my case. Other arguments will be extended by my second speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, the first speaker, for that speech. Let's have the first position speaker. I continue to just time ourselves and make sure you don't go beyond 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Thank you. Let's have the first position speaker.
Okay, I want to confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, Chair, firstly, we need to understand that side proposition has failed to understand the Vatican's position in terms of same-sex marriages. The Vatican does not support the blessings of same-sex marriages, inherently meaning the Vatican is still in line with the Christian values and the Christian doctrine. Now, moving on, what are the interests of the Vatican and the Ugandan Church? One, they want the salvation of God. They want to increase their following and spread the gospel as to many people as possible. And they also want to offer gospel for the people suffering from sexual immorality. Now, moving on to my characterization, what they fail to understand is what necessarily the Vatican meant by these blessings. Now, they want to bless couples, they refuse and they continue to refuse the blessing of marriages of same-sex people because it does not, or it contradicts with the teachings of the church, which the Vatican is still actively promoting. Since it does not recognize those things as marriages, then any rites of prayers or blessings are still forbidden and admissible by the Vatican Church, which is in line with what the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church actually advocates for. The Roman Vatican Church still advocates that marriage is a union between man and woman that is exclusive, stable, and insoluble union. So the church still remains firm on that stance. So the church does not have any power to impact blessings upon the union of people of same-sex marriages. So the rite of the sacrament of marriage can only be given to a man and a woman, and any other blessing done by the church is not seen as the form of rite of sacrament, which is still in line with what the teachings teach us. Now, moving on to what they mean by these blessings have their recipients and are intended to evoke glory to God. Those who invoke blessings are invited to increase their strength in faith and trust God. So what is being blessed necessarily should be in line with what God wants and what God has taught us. Since the church considers same-sex marriages outside of what God wants, they're deemed illegal, illicit, and are not given that matrimonial form of blessing, which is still on our side. So when one comes to ask for themselves a blessing, they show a need to be in God's serving presence, inherent meaning that they recognize the need for salvation from God, necessarily meaning that we are still in line with what is in the Catholic teaching and still in line with what the government of Uganda aims to promote. So when one asks for this blessing, there is no need for some sort of exhaustive moral analysis on what kind of person this person is, and there is no need for a precondition for offering it. They do not have to be morally perfect to receive a blessing from God. This is why we still have in status quo priests and Vatican, all kinds of people, blessing people such as prisoners who are deemed immoral but are still given blessings because they seek salvation of God. So when one becomes aware of the Lord's gifts of God, God's gifts, and realizes they are sinful, they should be gifted a blessing. Now, moving on to what the Vatican meant by the blessings of same-sex marriage and those things. To more clarity, the blessing is not impacted onto the marriage. It is impacted into these individuals so that they receive salvation. So the Vatican stated that the blessing should not be impacted with the concurrence of ceremonies of union. That means that the blessing should not be counted in form of marriage, and the blessing should not even be put upon any form of marriage between these people. What the blessing looks like is when this couple comes to meet a priest to seek God's guidance and further evaluate and strengthen their relationship with God, which is one of the major interests of the Ugandan Church and Catholic faith, which is offering the gospel to those suffering from sexual immorality. So moving on, the church sacraments, the church is the sacrament of God's infinite love. Now, before I continue to my argument, I take your PY.
Despite all the fallacies you've told us, who heads Vatican?
These are not fallacies. Why? Because if you clearly read the document or the press statement by the Vatican, you can clearly reference what I'm saying. So inherently meaning your question is inherently wrong, but to answer it, it is the Pope. Now moving on to the rebuttal and engagement. They talked about principle of responsibility, how the church is responsible for its followers and congregation and should not contradict in such a way. But notice that the characterization I gave you earlier clearly shows that the church is not moving away from the Catholic doctrine and any of the teachings that have been presented earlier. So inherently means that the church is still being responsible and actually promoting responsibility more on our side by seeking to offer salvation to the people who have strayed away from God's path. Now moving on to why it's not justified is because the argument we're bringing, it's not justified. Why is this true? One, the church has a foundation of unity. Both churches have a shared interest of maintaining unity under the Pope's leadership, and it's crucial to maintain the church's core beliefs, which the Vatican has done so, inherently not justifying the church breaking law. And two, the teachings are interpretation and hierarchy. There's no fundamental change in the Catholic doctrine. The Vatican stance still remains clear, and blessings for same-sex marriages are not allowed. So it does not permit for the marriage to be blessed, but seems to save these people from their sins. So moving on to the claim, the church should not secede from the Vatican due to the poor interpretation of what this kind of blessing is, and the doctrinal unity and the hierarchical structure of the church should be preserved despite any form of disagreement. So the importance of preserving this unity, it reflects a commitment to maintaining maintain a united moral voice in terms of global affairs. So if you see it happening, like the church is breaking up, it will form a form of unite. The impact of this is essentially that should the church secede, it will initiate fragmentation in the Catholic faith, leading to a division of the church, even among Ugandan Catholics, because people who clearly understand what the Vatican meant by this doctrine will conflict with those who don't. And the conclusion is that it is important to maintain this unity to provide a united moral voice in society, and the secession will not only weaken the Vatican Church, but it also weaken the Ugandan Church because of disagreements in interpretation. So what we put forth on our side is rather a form of dialogue or speaking to clear up or raise the air around this form of blessing, because inherently it's present that in society right now there is current disagreements on what actually this blessing represents, and what we front on our side is the fact that the Vatican still remains within the Catholic doctrine, and the Ugandan Church is not justified in breaking up because the Vatican Church has remained consistent in its teaching. Therefore, I beg to submit.
Okay, so I hope I am audible.
Yeah, yes, you're audible. Thank you for the first negative speaker for that fine speech. Let's have the second formative speech.
Okay, so I'll take my POIs verbally, and I think I'll take them in around the 4th minute. Before then, please do not badger me. Yes, okay. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. For too long, we have been eroding our culture and morality. That is to say, we switch our cultural traditions, such as traditional weddings in Gombe to church weddings in white gowns. We think that at a point in time, we are pushed to the edge and have to support the Vatican in supporting immoral activities. It goes against our principles as protagonists for morals, and it goes against our culture as a nation with cultural ethnicity. We cannot have this proud to propose. Three things that I'm going to do in this debate. I'm going to do rebuttal. I'm going to extensively analyze the impact analysis in regards to independence and sovereignty, morality, and also spirituality in regards to faith. With rebuttal, they come and argue that, oh, you know what, the Vatican doesn't support same-sex marriages and whatnot. That is side opposition tries to run a hard line into this debate, but even then let's actually engage them. Notice that they entirely contradict with the info slide and the motion. It is clearly stated in the info slide. The Pope discussed the grounds of possibilities of actually allowing these same-sex marriages and whatnot. Even someone would ask them in a POI, who does hate Vatican and whatnot, they clearly tell you it's the Pope and whatnot. What does this necessarily mean? It means that the Church of Vatican is the one that is necessarily contributing to this. Why? Because the utmost supreme leader is the one that gets to stand out and say these kinds of things. This entirely means that it's then the Vatican Church that is necessarily supporting such immoral activities at the end of the day. And this is as to why this particular argument, which they base their entire case on, stands out into this debate. When the impact of this, or when it comes to the impact of supporting the same-sex marriages and as to why we should not necessarily continue supporting these particular cases, is that when you continue to support that, it means you're going to have an erosion of your culture at the end of the day. This looks like something Samawi tells you. It means that at the end of the day, you're having this particular young kid growing up and knowing that, oh, you're actually allowed in the Vatican Church to maybe have the same-sex marriages and whatnot. That sort of indoctrination goes up into society, and it becomes a normality at the end of the day because of this particular same support that you give them and whatnot. But how can you do not have such things? It shows this particular young boy when they are growing up, this sort of indoctrination that, oh, maybe Uganda, Church of Uganda, the Roman Catholic Church of Uganda broke away. It's not something that they necessarily support at the end of the day, and it's not something that we should then uphold because it shows itself it's a precedent that is created at a point in time we're not supporting something, we should then break away from it. But then secondly, the whole idea of maintaining unity that they preached was into this debate and the likelihood of the precedent that comes about and how it causes dividing and whatnot. Two key responses to this chapter. Notice that breakaway also exists onto their side of the house. Why is this so? Because you understand at a point in time you're having churches, notice how the Vatican Church is messing up, and they're still seeing the Roman Catholic Church of Uganda probably still standing with this particular same church, and then creates this particular picture that, oh, you know what, this is something that is then necessarily being supported, and we're supporting an evil, so let's break away from the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church since it hasn't done the right thing to break away from the Vatican Church. But then you get to notice why it's then more on their side of the house. It's because this thing is literally more clear. It's literally more clear that Vatican is supporting same-sex marriages. It's literally more clear that these things happen more onto their side of the house. But then actually assume, this is not something that is maybe true. And let's assume that, okay, on our side of the house, there is that particular sort of precedent that is created that these churches are breaking away at the end of the day. Why is this still entirely justified? We think at a point in time that there is a high likelihood of our morality wasted and whatnot. At a point in time, there is, okay, check in. Hurry up. 1, 2.
Are you aware of the Vatican stance on same-sex marriages?
Yes, thank you. Exactly. That's what I'm clearly telling you from the very first minute of my speech. I clearly tell you that the Pope discussed the count of the possibility. What does this necessarily mean? You are literally allowing same-sex marriages. I think this is something that should not necessarily cause a clash into this debate because it's clearly explained from the info slide. This is literally a meaningless POI. Please get much more better. But not the whole issue that I was still telling you on the reason as to why this is entirely justified, the breaking away and the most likelihood of the president. You're comparing two presidents in this debate. One is on the whole idea of probably getting a president every single time there is a challenge to break out. Then secondly, on our whole president that we stand for into this debate is on the whole idea at a point in time that there is an evil that is then being created. It is better for you to break away from this particular evil. The principle we are supporting here is that a fight against an evil is a good in and of themselves. Look at these principles, and let's actually weigh them. We think at a point in time we have a world whereby we are looking at a world where we are breaking away from things that are necessarily hazardous and dangerous to us, to our morals, to our cultures. Then that is entirely a much better world because you uphold your cultures at the end of the day. You have children with better indoctrination at the end of the day, and you have much more moral standards at the end of the day. Whereas on our side of the house, we tell you that you should then have that kind of fighting against an evil whenever it's actually evil. And this is why we necessarily, in regards to those, to create precedents that are actually created. Then with the whole idea of impacts and whatnot, we bring to you three key things in this debate. Firstly, is on the independence and sovereignty. Secondly, is on the morality. Thirdly, is the growth of spirituality. First, on the independence and sovereignty. Notice on the side of the house, the more we actually have this sort of unity between the Vatican Church and the Roman Catholic Church, it creates this sort of precedent that can continue eroding our morals, it can continue eroding our cultures and whatnot at the end of that day, because it's not something that's necessarily going to, the Ugandan Catholic Church is actually going to do to break out. This then entirely means that you have imperialism at the end of the day, whereby they use us they use it to control us, to support wrong activities just because of this particular unity. On our side of the house, this is actually solved with the secession, because you have them breaking away every single time there is actually like a problematic thing or an evil thing that is happening, i.e. a good in and of itself that will tell you into this debate. But then secondly, the whole idea of morality, something that is entirely very important into this debate, because we think that as a country, we rely on cultural ethnicity, we rely on morality ethics and morality doctrine. So at a point in time, outside of the house, we tell you that we uphold this more because we're breaking away from an evil. We're creating a precedent into society and showing other young kids and the future generation that this is something bad that we do not necessarily have to uphold at the end of the day. This is something that Thank you.
All right, thank you for that fine speech. I continue to encourage speakers to time themselves and not to overshoot, because I won't record anything beyond 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Let's welcome the second speaker from the negative side.
Well, am I audible?
You're very audible.
Okay. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Even when a person's relationship with God is clouded by sin, he can always ask for a blessing. Now, this debate is in line with the Pope's endorsement of the same marriage sex blessings. One thing that members of Team Affirmative have ignored up to this time is that Vatican still upholds its position that does not support same-sex marriages. But what we are looking at is, do people who have engaged in same-sex marriages deserve blessings or they don't? And in the long run, should the Uganda Roman Catholic Church secede from the Vatican, or it shouldn't? Now, what do we get from members of Team Affirmative in this debate? Right away from their first speech, they talk of how churches give a vital role on how they influence people. In other words, they incorporate what the Bible teaches. But it's very clear to us right now that the Vatican has not gone against what the Bible teaches, but rather they are still incorporating what the Bible teaches, because everyone deserves a chance to change. These people deserve the blessing since they are seeking to know more about what can help them. It's also actually in line with what the Uganda Roman Catholic Church wants, because it's also committed to offering the gospel to those who are struggling with homosexuality, and it also upholds its biblical position. Now, one thing that they don't notice in this debate is that Uganda as a country itself, including the Roman Catholic Church, is already protected from all that they talk about, including eroding culture, including independence. All the morality that they talk about is already catered for by the Anti-Homosexuality Act that's already in place. We already know that that act has stringent punishments for people who are to engage in such acts. That actually shows that in our country, Uganda, the likelihood of having same-sex marriages is almost zero. Therefore, the chances of having blessings for same-sex marriage is already protected. For if we are to take members of Team Affirmative at their best in terms of culture, in terms of independence rule that they talk about, that means the Roman Catholic Church is protected from that. Therefore, it has no enough reason to secede from the Vatican that they are talking about. One thing that we get from their first speech, that if the Uganda Roman Catholic Church is to keep in line with Vatican after them passing blessings for same-sex marriage blessings. This is something that's shown in terms of inclusivity. In that, yes, your sexual beliefs are different from what we actually uphold, but you also deserve a chance in the eyes of God. That's what Vatican is trying to put in place. Therefore, it's not going against any biblical teachings. Yes, one thing they talk about that if we are to continue aligning with them, we are going to foster such morals in our people, but that's not actually the case, because this comes in to help these people understand that God still cares about them, and in the long run they can be able to stop such things they're talking about. Yes, religion does not actually uphold that, and Vatican does not have the same-sex marriages, but due to the societal changes that are happening in place, endorsement of same-sex marriages has been in place. So why shouldn't we actually bless them? That's the position of the Vatican, and actually it's something that's progressive, and it's not a departure from the core principles. That's the entire baseline of members of Team Affirmative. Now, what do we get from members of Team Negative? As members of Team Negative, what do we believe in that the Roman Catholic Church should not actually secede from the Vatican. Why? Because what they're doing is also actually in the interest of the Catholic Church. It's very clear that the blessings that you are bringing in place do not cease being the simple gestures, and they are just providing an effective means of increasing these people's trust in God and the people who ask for them. The blessing that come in place are for these couples to go to church in Vatican, and they ask to be blessed by the church, and that's what the church does. In other words, it also upholds what you're talking about. Now, one thing that we get from members of Team Affirmative, one thing they claim of the morality that we are talking about, but if the people have decided to actually go into the same-sex marriage that they are talking about, then it's already done. That's what they believe in, and that's the line they've taken to choose. What we come up with as the church, we are meant to rectify people's ideas, as it also comes up in the responsibility and obligation that comes in there. Says we are meant to bring people back to God, not to chase them away. In other words, this draws the people back to the church that we are talking about. And in the long run, this may not affect the Catholic Church of Uganda, as we've already seen in our speeches. Well, one thing that we see now, if they are to actually go with a affirmative case and the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church secedes away from Vatican, what do we see? One, you're creating disunity within the church. Why? It's actually, if it's actually Vatican that is the origin, that's the best, that's the headquarters of the Catholic Church, then it's going away from it de-emphasizes the importance of maintaining unity within the global Catholic Church. And what does that show? Can you actually come into a dialogue with the Vatican that you're talking about? Can the Uganda Roman Catholic Church come in a dialogue with that? Yes, for such countries where same-sex marriages are allowed everywhere. Remember, the only type of marriages we have is not a church marriage. In other countries, we have civil marriage. A couple can go and get married civically in a court of law. What does that show to us? In other words, the same-sex marriages will keep on to continue, but are you meant to push away these people or not? And does it later affect the Uganda Roman Catholic Church, or it doesn't? As members of Team Negative, we say it doesn't. Now, we all have difference of opinions on certain issues, right? But the church is meant to be a unifying center. But if an issue is failed to be resolved by church, and in other words, you go on breaking off, how sure are you that even after breaking off, the same-sex marriage blessings will actually stop? It's not very clear. And this will actually later in the long run end to evolution of the doctrine. In other words, though the society changes have taken place and the same-sex marriages are in place, seceding away from the Roman Catholic Church is killing off the doctrine of what you actually follow. It actually kills the entire essence of what Team Affirmative Teams says they are standing for, because if they're the ones who likely they admit with us that this religion was just introduced and people coped up with it, and now if you're cutting off, then what's the clear essence of taking it up in the first place? In other words, what we advocate for as Team Negative, we need engagement and the reforms that foster change, and they also preserve the unity of the church that we're talking about. And given the fact that we are debating in line with the same-sex marriage blessings, shouldn't leave the debate, but the probability in our country of same-sex marriage happening is ultimately zero. So that shows that this does not affect the Roman Catholic Church. At this point, I think I rest my case.
Thank you, Jeremiah, for that. I think it's fine. Let's welcome the fifth speaker from Ahmed.
Okay, Judge. I'd like to confirm audibility before I begin my speech.
You are very audible.
All right, I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel of jury, in the spirit of sportsmanship, let me break the resolution down for Team Negative. Understand that the resolution says, this House believes that the Uganda Roman Catholic Church should secede from the Vatican. Now, in light of the info slide, despite the fact that it talks about blessing of same-sex couples, this particular resolution is not calling for whether or not it is right to bless same-sex marriages, or whether it is the core of this debate for us to be blessing gay couples, right? What this debate is calling for is for us to analyze whether it is in the best interest of the Uganda Roman Catholic Church to secede from the Vatican or not. And that is what we as Team Proposition have been fronting from you, as Samrawi tells you in our very first speech. So what do we get from Team Opposition? Opposition claims that the Roman Catholic Church in Vatican is still very much in line with the biblical teachings, and it also says that blessings are given to someone seeking righteousness or salvation. Now, this is not what the debate is asking for, but even if we were to take them at their best case scenario, as they tell us that we should stay together with the Vatican because the church acts as a unifying factor and the teachings have not clearly changed. But as a supreme cleric, as the Pope, right, you have a responsibility of keeping your flock together by not avoiding loose statements like the one that he made. So this is why we are telling you that even if we were to take them at their best case scenario, as Samrawi tells you in our first speech, as a cleric, as a major cleric of a religious sect such as the Catholics, you have a responsibility to your flock to make sure that they stay together. So what unity are you breeding if you're making loose statements like that? And then secondly, let me explain this to the team arguing in proposition. We presented to you 3 arguments. We told you that Ugandan culture and values have existed way before Catholicism even reached the East African coast. And it is not in our culture to be blessing gay couples or even endorsing them for that matter, even we should do so. Otherwise, what we shall be doing is eroding our culture in the long run. This is what we are presenting to you as team proposition. We tell you that we cannot risk our culture and our values just because of a religion that we adopted yesterday, over the fact that while we overlook our culture and norms that have stood with us since day one. And then secondly, the precurrent speaker asks us how we are going to agree if we keep breaking off. We tell you that seceding is not something that we are calling for. That every other time 2 parties do not agree that they should secede or break away from each other. No. And as they tell us that we are fostering disunity, that is not the case. But we consider what is at stake. As my second speaker tells you in her speech, we tell you that our morality and our culture and our values as Africans are what is at stake at this moment. And in a scenario where our culture and values that have stood with us since time immemorial, way before Catholicism and religion reached Uganda, we cannot throw that out the window just because religion is telling us that we can now bless same-sex couples. But secondly, we tell you that we want to prevent imperialistic tendencies, right? So Catholicism is not Ugandan. It is something we just adopted. Like every other thing we have adopted, of course, like every other foreign material that we have adopted, what that then causes is that the West then dictates on us what is right and what is wrong. This is what Samrawi tells you in her first speech. And when they do this while they are overlooking our culture and our values. They do this covertly through religion and social reforms, right? So you realize that at the end of the day, when the West is telling us what we should do, what we think is right, and when the West is wanting to dictate upon us what we think is right and what we think is wrong, while overlooking our culture and morals that have stood with us since time immemorial, we believe that that is not something we can then, that is not reason enough for us to continue staying under the Vatican, right? So it is justifiable for the Uganda Roman Catholic Church to secede because we are preventing imperialistic tendencies. We all know the negatives that come from imperialism, right? Brainwashing, cultural erosion, and immorality. And at the end of the day, when you compare the two worlds, that is not a society that is desirable for Ugandans, right? We do not want a society where we have people that are brainwashed, people that are cultural, people that do not know anything about culture, and people that are immoral, because that is what a society without culture breeds. And that is what the Roman Catholic Church, headed in Vatican, is trying to do here. This is a tendency of imperialism, and this is something that we as Team Proposition cannot side with. But then secondly, as my second speaker tells you, we are trying to grow in faith as Ugandan Catholics, right? Since since both sides agree that Catholicism was introduced in Uganda, we have had numerous Ugandan clerics who have over time developed an understanding of our religion that is in line with our culture. And we believe that these are the people that we should be following, rather than clerics who are seated all the way in the Vatican and do not understand anything about Ugandan values and norms. This is something that the team arguing in opposition fails to debate all around through, but continue to tell us that it is okay for people to be blessed as long as they're seeking salvation. Yes, we agree with that fact, but can you tell us, or can you justify to us why it would actually be better for us to stay when our morals and values are being underlooked? Now, notice the fact that, as I mentioned, Catholicism, when Catholicism was introduced, we have since over time had clerics who have grown spiritually and faithfully and have got a better understanding of religion in line with the culture that is actually here in Uganda. Unlike the Pope, who makes loose statements because he's seated all the way in the Vatican and does not understand the culture and norms of the people of Uganda. So you realize that it is much better for us to secede and follow the clerics that we have here, because after all, we adopted this culture, we adopted this religion, and when we adopted it, we decided that we shall have our own people that will follow it in line with what we believe in line with what we believe in culturally and on lines of values and morality. So at the end of the day, you realize that it is much better for us to secede rather than us following someone who makes loose statements because they are seated at the very top and do not understand anything about culture and norms here in Uganda. So secondly, the first speaker from Team Opposition talks about the fact that blessings are given to people who are seeking righteousness or salvation, right? But understand, dear judge, that much as that is what the team arguing in opposition may be fronting to you in this debate, they do not clearly show us the benefits of us remaining with the Vatican. What do we show you on Team Proposition? We tell you that when we secede from the Vatican, first and foremost, we shall be protecting our culture and our values as Ugandan. And at the end of the day, we shall do away with cases to do with brainwashing and cultural erosion, right? And at the end of the day, that is a much more desirable society, because that is a society that is moral, that is a society that is upright, and that is a society that is not brainwashed, that sticks to culture and ethnicity. This is what my second speaker was telling you. So you realize that the benefits on our side of the debate actually outweigh the benefits on their side of the debate. But then secondly, in light with the info slide, we consider the recent sentiments of the head Catholic cleric, the Pope, on gay couples, right? So even if we were to take them at their best case scenario, you realize that the fact that he made a loose statement like it is fine for us to bless gay couples, and what it took Team Opposition, all the hell that it took Team Opposition through to actually understand and delve deep into what the Pope was actually meaning, is actually going to cause the disunity that they are talking about in their side of the house, right? So they talk about maintaining unity on their side of the house and how both sides actually stand for the same things. But you realize that when a cleric makes such loose statements, at the end of the day, there is going to be disunity on their side of the house, whereas the side of the house will actually maintain unity. So on our side of the house, you understand that we actually achieve more than on their side of the house. For that case, therefore, I believe that it's in the best interest of the Uganda Roman Catholic Church to secede. I beg to rest my case.
All right, thank you, the third affirmative. Let's have the third opposition to close the case of opposition.
Okay, may I confirm I'm audible or can be heard?
Yes, you are audible.
Good. Let me set my timer. So I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Where the head still remains the head and the others function because of the head, that is the case that opposition presents to you. Vatican still remains the head. But first things, what I need to clarify in today's debate. One thing that the two sides have to answer is sort of this seeding the best thing that they need to do, and is it in the interest of Vatican? And as well as the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church. That's the first thing that the two sides have to answer. But then secondly, I'm going to run for you the impacts and the points of clash that have been raised in today's debate, right? So first of all, we need to understand that Pope Francis didn't necessarily say that the Catholic Church actually sort of supports these gay marriages. What he said is he actually allows these priests to bless them. First of all, we need to understand that these gay couples are not even necessarily sort of have a religion, or they are not even necessarily Catholics. That's the first thing we need to understand. And secondly, holy matrimony is different from the blessings that these priests are giving them. Holy matrimony is a sacrament in the Roman Catholic Church, or in the Christian domination, whereby a man and a woman are united under the sort of God's blessings. That's what holy matrimony looks like. But what Pope Francis then necessarily said is, he said that the priest can then bless them. So the points of clash: one, this is sort of unity versus sovereignty. What proposition comes in and tells us is, you know what, they want to sort of promote sovereignty, when actually this Uganda Roman Catholic Church then breaks, but rather not them being united. But I'm going to show you the impacts, what then happens when necessarily this Ugandan Roman Catholic Church then breaks off from the Vatican. One, this is going to sort of cause division between the people. Instead of people sort of worshiping God and being drawn closer to God, they're going to then be divided. And what happens when there is division? There's going to be sort of loss of international recognition of this Ugandan Roman Catholic Church. What then does this mean? This looks like it's going to be stopped from carrying out certain sacraments because the world doesn't recognize it as part of the Vatican. And secondly, this means that other dominations might not even necessarily accept them because they decided to break off from Vatican. But then thirdly, this then means that even though they break off, that is now the best scenario that proposition tells us. Even though they break off, what happens is they are going to then face challenges. What do these challenges look like? Funding, this administration, and all that theology, all them getting this blessing, them getting these teachings and everything, that hierarchy order of the Catholic Church. Then meaning that even though they break off, challenges are then going to exist. But then lastly, this is going to affect the relations that they have between society, between government, and between other Christian domination. What this looks like is that other churches may not necessarily even welcome the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church because they decided to break off from the Vatican, meaning that they're sort of then going to create their own domination, or maybe they're going to sort of be split up in the end of the day, which means that we're not going to then achieve unity. And lastly, there is going to be backlash from society. What does this backlash from society then necessarily look like? Inherently, when these people actually break off, what happens is society is then not going to accept them because they are going to back up, because backlash is going to come. But then secondly, we need to understand that in a country like Uganda, where the anti-homosexuality bill was passed, that means that it takes someone courage and a heart to actually go to a priest and then tell them that, you know what, bless this, because they know that a death penalty has been put, fines have been put. So meaning that the chances of this gay couple even standing out is something that is very small, meaning that then this what proposition tells us is something that they run on assumptions, but then they do not even prove their assumptions, right? But then from our end, we tell you that unity is something that should be sort of that should be gained from our case. Why is that then? When there is unity, people are going to be drawn back to God, and there is going to have this impact, since we tell you that dialogues are going to then be had, because not everyone has actually understood what Pope then passed, just what Pope has done. They have failed to understand what Pope Francis actually passed. So meaning that by the time they have dialogues and they bring it to a conclusion, that's when we can then have unity, right? But then secondly, they talk about the obligation versus the responsibility. They tell us that it's the responsibility of the church and all that these norms and these principles are then upheld, right? But in a world whereby then the church necessarily breaks off, meaning that people can still do whatever they feel like, but if it remains, have these dialogues and then teach people the right way, then this necessarily means that norms and principles are then protected. But you breaking off means that people then have choices to actually go and even decide to become gay if they decide to be. But if you then remain and then if you remain under the Vatican and then actually have this church passing on these norms, this sacrament, this then means that there's going to still be unity and the obligation and responsibility is achieved. But then even though we take proposition, they do not necessarily show us how this responsibility and obligation is then achieved, meaning that they give us the mechanism, but they do not show us the impact that it has. But then secondly, they tell us about the manipulation, how it's then reduced from the end of the house. But that was something that was brought in the first speaker, but the second and third did not necessarily actually talk about it. But manipulation is something then that is actually worse from their case if you are to take them at their best case. Why is that? This then shows an image to the world that, you know what, if you actually have conflicting interests within a religion, the best thing to to do is actually like break off. What happens even when you break off? You're not going to still achieve your interest. But mind you, from our first speaker, he told you that the interests of the Vatican and the Ugandan Roman Catholic Church are things that necessarily align. What then does this look like? Pope Francis did not say he scraps off whatever the Bible has, that a man and a woman should be united. He just said that he wants to promote inclusivity. Why then do we achieve inclusivity from our end of the house rather than from proposition? You see, proposition comes in and tells you that a religion is something that needs to make people like feel their sense of belonging and shows them like it's like what makes them human, right? But from our end, we tell you inclusivity is then achieved from our end because you're still blessing it, even though necessarily God does not act that inclusivity is achieved because even God loves sinners. That is the reason as to why he actually like came on earth. So with these points of clash, morality versus salvation, the holy matrimony versus the blessings, we all show you the impact from the opposition bench that proposition then necessarily fails. With that, I beg to rest my case.
Thank you. Let's have reply speeches.
Just want to confirm if I'm audible.
Audible. You're very, very audible.
Yeah, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, it is clear at the beginning of this debate that side proposition did not read the official Vatican press statement. They took information at face value and refused to analyze the logic and reasoning behind what the Vatican said. So they took it at what they were saying. This inherently led to a misunderstanding on their side as to what the Vatican stance on same-sex marriage inherently is. Now, if they are presenting a misunderstanding and it's within our society that most of us have misunderstood the Vatican's position, it really becomes important, like what you suggested throughout our speeches, to have a dialogue to sort of clear the air. So now, why do we necessarily win this debate? Notice that we are able to prove to you from first to second to third speech that the Vatican has not deviated from the original Catholic teaching and is still in line with the moral codes that had set forth at its introduction, inherently meaning that it's not justifiable to claim that the Ugandan government to claim that it has done so because there is presence of misunderstanding that is even inside proposition. Now, moving on to the clashes of this debate, we clearly want by showing you that they were still preserve the Vatican or the Ugandan Church's responsibility in the sense that it's able to unify and show clear the misunderstanding that is present within the individuals. Notice that there is no form of morals changing. There is no form of kind of like trying to recede the African values that this side proposition is trying to perpetuate because the Vatican has not deviated from the original Catholic teachings. And even if it allows for blessings of these people to receive salvation because they are sinful, it inherently means that they are still recognizing that same-sex marriages are a sin and these people deserve God's salvation. That inherently makes the whole argument fall out because they base on the assumption that the Vatican Church is promoting or allowing for same-sex marriages and does not consider it sinful, which is inherently wrong because the Vatican Church has remained firm on its stance that it still considers such an act as sin. So why we necessarily win this debate is we're able to show you why the Vatican Church is still aligned with the interests of not only the Ugandan public, but the Ugandan Catholic Church, but also the public, and is still in line with the moral values and cultures present within the society because our Ugandan culture still considers those things sinful. Same thing for the Vatican Church. So I want you to base this debate on the analysis that we gave to you as to the reasoning behind why the Vatican actually stood for its position. That shows you clearly why the government or why side proposition falls out in this debate, because they seem to perpetuate the idea that we're seeking to change the culture or seeking to change the perception of Uganda, which is inherently wrong. They can't aimed to do so was to impose inclusion on the salvation of these people because they're still sinful and the government and the church recognizes that there's need for them to be saved. That's why we still have people like prisoners receiving blessings, which is very similar to what the Vatican is trying to introduce. So on our side, we're able to show you adequate throughout our speeches why we win on the clashes, the impacts of our debate, and essentially we're able to show you adequately why we win this debate. With that, I rest my case.
Thank you for that reply speech, Larry. Let's have the proper reply speech to close this very, 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 very hit.
Okay, so Chair, am I audible?
Yes, you're very audible.
Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, you have to understand that we can't serve two masters at the same time. It's either being firm in your word or actually taking the other side. Opposition comes and tells us. They come and give us assertions that we don't understand the whole idea. Like they come and tell us that the whole idea is actually blessing this same-sex marriage. One thing we actually don't clearly side with them. We come and tell you that blessing them in and itself is like literally embracing them, which is actually contradicting throughout their text. These are the things they come and tell us. They come and tell us that God does not actually hate sinners, but then from our side we achieve unity and inclusivity, right? But then let me show you how you don't achieve actually unity. We come and tell you that such indoctrines that are going to be put into this Catholic religion, what is going to happen is that various people are going to have these different ideologies. At the point in time, once there are these different ideologies, then these people are going to start even questioning the religion in and itself. Then at a point in time, what is going to happen is that there is going to be disunity from their side because they're literally embracing it. Why? Because they're literally telling them that, you know what, we are giving blessings to same-sex marriage. Then again, you're telling us that we're giving probably the sacrament of the holy matrimony. What does that mean? It means you're giving them a platform to actually keep on going ahead to actually engage in such homosexuality or the same-sex marriage. At a point in time, this is the thing we don't aside as team affirmative. We tell you that such even blessings in and itself is wrong, and as the Uganda Roman Catholic, we don't aside with them. Why? Because we show you that at a point in time, once you embrace or even give them these blessings, you're giving them a platform for actually more increment, right? Because people are going to say, after all, at the end of the day, I'm still getting blessings, so why don't I just actually go for this marriage? So what happens at the end of the day is that people are going to go and like throw away their values, their morals are actually questioned, and then it's going to be disunity from their side of the world because people actually have these various ideologies, and then at the end of the day, we show you that there's going to be confusion throughout the state. We can tell you from our speeches that this Uganda Roman Catholic this Uganda Roman Catholic Church actually has a vital role in shaping society, i.e., it has the great responsibility and obligation towards believers. It means that once I say no, it's a no. That doesn't mean that I'm supposed to go ahead and give like other alternatives, which we don't clearly side with team opposition. But then secondly, we tell you once these people do not withdraw from Vatican, we show you that Vatican is like the center of Christianity where policies can actually be turned anyhow. That means that people are going to have their values and morals questioned at the end of the day, which is going to lead to eradication and even like degrading of morals and like culture at the end of the day. So with that, chair, in order to uphold the responsibility and the culture and remove like this whole idea of imperialism and sovereignty, we show you that Uganda Roman Catholic should withdraw formally from such organizations, and we show you that we can't serve two masters at the same time. Let us be firm and let us actually go through like how we actually can strengthen spiritual faith. And at the end of the day, we don't aside with team opposition with literally blessing or like bringing in sinners, which gives them like more platform. With that, it's a clear affirmative win.
All right, thank you for that lovely reply speech. Just give me a few seconds to peruse through my notes to go back to the info slide, since this debate has had a clash point called what does the info slide say, in order to make sure that maybe the call I have generated is the right. Few seconds. I'll return shortly, very shortly. Good evening to all of us. I want to confirm whether one, I can be heard, two, whether both teams are here. Over feedback.
They're audible. And Ahmad TV is here, I think.
Okay, is the entire proposition here? Maybe I should read name after name. Okay, is the entire prop here? Team captain for prop and all?
Yeah, all of the proposition members are around.
Opposition, are all of us here?
Yes, I
Opposition,
believe opposition is here.
all of you are here.
I'm not seeing Harmon, so we are two here.
Can someone reach her? Anyway, I think if she doesn't come, she will listen to the recording on YouTube. Yeah, try to tap her and also try and reach out. I'm going to start with general feedback. So if she comes in early, she's able to perhaps also listen to the call and its justification. So I'm going to start with the flowers. The flowers are that I really enjoyed progress. By progress, I mean there's some people here whom I told to improve in certain areas that have improved. For example, I have had, I think, some we using opening statements and good ones, like really a statement. I have also seen, I think it was the second speaker from OP, still using opening statements. I also like the opening statement of the group speaker. It was quite hilarious, and I liked it, I guess. But again, I would greatly encourage. I think it is Larry, who was the first speaker from OP, to try learning how they are constructed. It's very simple art. You ask anyone here, really. They are easy things, and perhaps they're enjoyable parts of the speech, and they are quite necessary for breaking the ice of the audience, but to get a feel of what your debate is going to be about. Then the second I think you need to do more drills regarding to opening statements. You had one, but it was up and about. It wasn't as clinical as I anticipated it, and that is something which perhaps we should work on. And the second thing is on argumentation. I think our argumentation has greatly improved, and still, I think I captured mostly all arguments and very clearly. I really did. I just think that we could start to add, to anticipate possible opposition to the arguments we have presented. Whenever you construct an argument and it doesn't seem like it has opposition, you know you are constructing a tautology. It's not an argument. It's like a fact. It's like when I say Joseph is a boy, it has no opposition. It can't be refuted. So make sure your arguments are refutable. Otherwise, those are not arguments. And ultimately, they simply remain characterizations. You know, characterizations in cases are very neutral. You can't respond to a characterization. For example, when you say the Catholic Church wants to have people saved, it's very neutral, right? When you say that that you have a responsibility to your members, it's very neutral. Because who can refute the fact that the Catholic Church has a responsibility to their members, right? Of course, in this debate, I didn't get I didn't get a response to that still, but the idea is that make sure your arguments are on a gradient because it really helps them to be worth consideration. The other is on the even if level of the argument. Most of us, we didn't want to take our opponents at their best. For example, proposition was arguing was arguing a case, and which opposition entirely like refutes and is like, okay, we don't we believe your interpretation is wrong. But then I think there is also the aspect of assume they are right, and I think that's a very very fundamental aspect of debate. Assume they are right and see where the argument goes. Right. One of the things that debate teaches us is to uh, however, whether you entirely disagree with an idea at face value, look for whether there's like some sort of truth in it. Because the moment you entirely ignore an idea, then you take the risk of what if, let's say, the audience interprets it otherwise. So you yes advance your position, but also be in a position where you can say, okay, let's assume they are right, and that's a very good perspective. The same thing I think happened to the negative. The entire, I think it happens on both sides of the house. None wants to take the other people at their best, and perhaps that sort of reduces the quality of the debate. Yeah, and debates which don't go that far become a bit problematic because there's going to be debates where you don't agree with the interpretation of issues of your opponent. So the idea is, what do? Do you entirely say I just don't agree? Yes, you say that, but then you also proceed to the level of okay, but let's assume they are right. Again, that's the debate. The even if level. It enables you to pay attention to, and then maybe you see whether there's a logical link, whether you can permutate the case of something. But the idea is you can't entirely dismiss a case. Yeah, and that's very, very, very vital. As the other issue, which is really, really important, is if your opponent brings forth an alternative, I think in any debate, whether it is policy or value, I know this was value, you can't just ignore it. For example, proposition ignores the idea of dialogue. And it came in, I think, in Larry's speech. It came in Larry's speech, in the first speech. I could tell, but it came a bit later as well. But Maisoon, you ignore it, and Guma Fischer, you also ignore it. No one makes like a response to it, but also the third opposition kind of just makes a comment on it, does not go back to like use that very case to keep the debate. And for my broader thought, if you have like an alternative, it's like your flag. In this debate, we are saying let's not secede, let's opt for dialogue, right? Because if we don't secede, we can't just keep quiet and maintain the status quo. It's dialogue, meaning it's like the flag of your case. If we don't use it to whip at a strategic level, then that becomes a problem. So in case you are ever in a whipping position and your team had an alternative, whether you're in a policy or value debate, it's good to use that very perspective, sort of whip the debate. Yeah. For example, in this case, the question is, let's say something bad has happened. How do we get out of it? Do we secede or do we not secede? But for you, your alternative was instead of seceding, let's now have dialogue. So you replace not seceding with dialogue because secession and maintain the status quo, secession at that level would have like an advantage. But secession against dialogue, and then now you are weighing it between the merits of dialogue and secession, and then you have a debate there. I don't know whether you are getting, because the other one would be secession versus status quo, which is a dangerous debate. But secession against dialogue it's a debate worth having. You break down some merits of stakeholders and values, and you see how to weigh. who was a whip? I think it was Harmon, right? So I broadly thought that was an error in strategy, and you should work on that. Now, the other thing is on substantiating arguments, and I'm going to go through very, very many speeches. So I already said we did well, but also some arguments is a serious problem. For example, when I think in the whip speech, Harmon was impacting the idea of unity and was like, in the event that there is disunity, then after you've seceded, then you don't have international recognition. Then after you don't have international recognition, you have no sacraments. Then other people cannot even welcome you. Now, I don't want to refute the possibility of those ideas. They can happen. But you see, and this is where I am going to advise us. You would rather have limited content, but which you have whose links, causal links, correlation links, reference ropes you have constructed, rather than saying so much and you are able not to defend the most substantiate them. It's like the case of you in the new curriculum. Do you study the Vinyoroshtara Empire? The Vinyoroshtara Empire was too big to be managed. Yes? I think even the Roman Empire, same thing. You have a very wide case and you don't have time to substantiate those rings. And assuming you are like a fast speaker, you will expose your case so much. And you could listen like to both your speeches. Very limited content, but well explained, which carries and that becomes like the bedrock of the debate up to the end. So let me see. For example, the idea of disunity within the church, I don't get the substantiate on exactly. Yeah. Disunity within the church. Yes. I don't get it. And I think it's the second speaker of negative says, let's weigh in between unity and dialogue. And still I am waiting for, okay, so let's see where this goes. But I don't get the analysis. It is just a statement which comes and goes away. And I don't think that's like very, 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 very good. That's very good. Then still proceeding to talk about unsubstantiated links. I'm seeing question marks. I think we can those are the question marks I see on links of argumentation. Oh yes, basically I think those are the links I don't get. Then the other concern is on points of information. One, do not take points of information before your argument. Yes. First have your arguments, and maybe when you're going like third argument, that's when you take points of information. I link us back to the document I think I shared on points of information. Because what is there to ask on your setup really? You have been talking about very neutral things. They are not necessarily arguable. They are just context really. It's not an argument. So the other thing is when you ask the question, I think it's good to be conversation. For example, you can ask me a question and I can really perceive it as stupid. Eh? But then I would perhaps not say that's a stupid question. I would perhaps, oh, I hear you. I hear here is my perspective. Rather than saying you are stupid, you are blah, 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 you're away from the paradigms you are using, blah, blah, blah. There's no need of using cold language in debate. You can still remain very neutral, very calm, yes, and still address someone. And I think you've seen it on TV. They ask someone a question, and the question is very interesting. And somebody said, "Oh, okay, I get your question. I really do." And then they come again with their perspective. So at its first, the interjection when you hear a question should be respect for the question itself, and then you can always respond in any way you want. But the interjection to a question cannot be called from the very word go. For you, have you ever asked a question and someone coldly roasts you? I don't know how it feels. For me, I'm just trying to say, I think it's good to you know, be a bit careful. That very, very, very perspective. The other thing is on fiat. I realized that the first speaker of proposition fiat out a very fundamental burden they had in the debate, which is to link blessings of same-sex marriage to abuse of doctrine. And I quote it here, that this debate is not on whether blessings of same-sex marriages are bad or not, it's about secession. But you see, this is an egg and chick case scenario. You can't say today we're talking about the chick and not the egg. That's ridiculous. Yes, sorry, I also used the bad word, but that's not good. It's not strategic. Because that's a crucial link you needed to link between what the blessings of a same-sex marriage, even if it is not necessarily allowing them to get married, but blessing them, what that would mean to the church. And I think that was like a very, very crucial link. So you can't fiat out your burden of proof. And I see it often. Do people know what fiat is? Fiat. Proposition has a fiat.
Honestly, I don't know what fiat is.
Exactly. I'm coming to that. Sure. So you can't frame out what your burden is. And you can only do that. Okay, you really can't do that. The idea is that if you're to frame out an argument, you would rather maybe frame it a trade-off. And I think this is like what Maisoon did in the second speech. Let's say you're talking about unity, that unity is going to be a trade-off in your case. So you can't say this debate is not about unity. Like you look at like a side of the debate which doesn't favor you, and you choose to say that the debate is not about. No, maybe you can only do that kind of argumentation in a policy debate where, let's say, like yesterday, we had a motion on this House bill that the 11th Parliament should revoke like that I think clause 2 of Article 156 of the Constitution. There you can say this debate cannot be about whether Parliament can do it or not. We understand Parliament may be in a political situation where it may not be able to do it. But this debate to happen, we have to assume that Parliament is in a position to do this very action. For this debate is on whether this action would be good for the interest of Parliament or not, regardless of whether the 11th Parliament would do it based on their political inclinations or not. So you're able to rule out arguments around the possibility of an actor doing something. Like in this debate, the only fiat you would employ is on the ability of the Catholic Church to do it. But you can't rule out the debate on whether same-sex blessings are good or bad, and I think that's really Larry really pulls out fundamentally from the beginning, and that becomes really, really bad for prop. Again, I haven't come to the core. I'm still giving general feedback. Okay, I think that's broadly it. Then the other thing is around strawman argumentation. You know, a strawman is a kind of argument where someone assumes what you said and then they rebut that very thing. For example, in this debate, I think opposition ran a strawman case where they are where they have a debate on whether the Vatican endorsed same-sex marriage by blessing same-sex couples. In the proposition case, I had not seen any argument that was talking about endorsing of same-sex marriages. They were talking about the blessings of same-sex couples. even when they hadn't substantiated it, their debate was not about the endorsement of same-sex marriage. So, and again, there could have been a way you can try and I think it was like a prepared guess. I could tell Larry came with a lot of energy. But where was the exact case which was where they were dealing with like in like the marriage itself, like allowing that marriage to, because that was the entire case from that you are seeking to separate and marriage. So and it was a rebuttal. So I was asking and I kept asking myself, so hello, I'm hearing someone unmuting. Could you please mute yourself? I am on the last piece of general feedback before I can get to the call. Who is speaking? Could you kindly, Nicola, have you mute yourself? Or do you want me to help you? Oh yeah. So, that was like a really classic strawman argument. Or strategy. So if you ever have like an argument as a team and you want that argument to get linked into the debate, broadly what you do is to expand the characterization of the debate, but not to use it as like a refutation strategy. Because you could, for example, you could have like a variable A, blessings, right? Affirmative has said that the Catholic Church has some sort of responsibility to protect African culture from this trend that is coming from the Vatican. Yeah, they are not very clear with what those blessings are, right? Now you have more information. What you do is not to respond. What you do as a speaker or as a team is to say, we want to expand the characterizations of what these blessings look like. And then you follow that line of argumentation. And this was a very, very good expanded characterization on what blessings look like. Once you read that document I shared, blessings were within the range you are talking about, around calling them to salvation and blah, 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 blah. But the idea is that you can't run it as happened to me in a debate. And I think it was like a final. So I have this case. The case is burning my fingers, and I run it as a rebuttal case rather than an exclusive recharacterization of the debate. The judges, and these were senior judges really, senior, I can't say the biggest judges technically at that time. They are like, you sold your case to the opponent instead of running it as like an exclusive case from your side. So you have to be very keen on what language you are using, because language can point to a reaction or an action. So as judges, we need to understand: are you responding to something, or are you simply expanding the characterization that is on the flow of the house? Now to the call. I'm going to end with a call. So this debate there were seven clashes, and I'm going to go through one at a time, and later on I will tell you who won the most important clashes and why. And then I grant a call. So let me read the motion again. In the light of the Pope's endorsement of same-sex marriage blessing, this house believes that the Uganda Catholic Church should secede from the Vatican. So 6 clashes. The first clashes is on the first clash, not in their order, but the first clash is on the question of unity. Proposition, mostly in the second speech, argues that unity is important, but there are grounds that can necessitate it to be watered down. And then they point to the idea of blessings of same-sex marriage being that kind of approach. From opposition side, their perspective of unity is that breaking away then ferments disunity within the church, and that is not desirable. That's the argumentation I get. Like, and I'm speaking about the links that exist on unity at that specific level. Then in the third opposition, there is a value comparison, I think, from Guma between the concept of disunity versus what is at stake. The idea of culture and morality versus disunity. So there's like a justification from proposition on, okay, yes, disunity will happen, but is it justified? Based on the links I see within the speeches, I grant that clash to proposition because I am more convinced and persuaded by the argument that disunity will happen, but it is justified since there is like a diversion from what the cultural norms of the place are. So I broadly thought the whip speakers needed to break the deadlock between disunity and dialogue. Now, why didn't I credit the idea of dialogue that came from opposition? And I think this is where I'm going to cover it. So from first opposition, I get the idea of let's dialogue. But then I don't get the substantiation on how that dialogue would work, on the chances of it working, on why it should be an approach that should be used against other approaches, and in this case, the approach that was being suggested by Team Affirmative, which is to secede from the Catholic Church. And again, I think there was an argument there. But was it made? No. From the first speech, still in the second speech, you know, some third opposition, Herman just makes a comment about it. And I felt like even when it was a good idea, it wasn't substantiated, and therefore I'm not going to credit. The second clash is on blessing couples vis-a-vis the endorsement of same-sex marriage. So I accept the characterization of opposition, which says that blessing couples does not particularly translate into blessing those, like accepting those marriages, like in terms of let's put a ring, come to church, man, man, woman, woman, or dog, dog, that kind of thing. However, I make the analysis which I get from all speeches seems to suggest that the blessings are unto salvation. Now, the response that then I get from opposition at that specific level is, okay, let's take you at your best. And I think this comes from Guma's speech, second speech. Let's take you at your best. If they're bracing them, doesn't that look like an interpretation? Why is that being interpreted as the acceptance of it? And who is to blame? Should it be the Catholic Church, or should it be should it be the Pope, or should it be those that are seceded? And again, I felt like you could have easily flipped this argument over that if there is like a misinterpretation. And I think Larry runs a very good case, which is not extended very well by second speech and third. The idea that, yes, there's a misinterpretation, but that misinterpretation of, let's say, a press statement should not necessarily lead us into secession. It should be something which leads us to dialogue. And again, you could have used dialogue to whip their entire arguments out, to say, okay, a bad thing has happened, and you accept the bad thing at an even if level. But the idea is that you run a case to defend that very thing as good. So the debate I had, blessing same-sex couples, on my ordinary understanding, since it wasn't substantiated, an ordinary person, because the judge is an ordinary, is it to be perceived as blessing them unto salvation? Because in that case, you would be just saying, we are encouraging same-sex couples to find God rather than these are the blessings we are finding there. So the ambiguity of language is then causing this misinterpretation. Again, for me, it's about strategy. Opposition would have really taken this specific clash. So I can't find a distinction between blessing couples unto salvation and that as that not meaning the endorsement of the idea of homosexuality. So there isn't like a clear distinction. I felt like if you had run an even if and accepted the premise that like you just allow and say, okay, let's say there is like a misinterpretation. What should be the way forward? And you continue to run your robust defense of dialogue and proving on how then that's better for the church. I think that's better. So even that second specific clash is won by proposition. The third is on what benefits the church members. So proposition runs an idea which is let's respect and be responsible for the flock we deal with by seceding. From the other side, what the picture I get, I think largely is from the third speech, which is that these members will not be accepted in other congregations and there won't be any international recognition. You're not strategically contributing to a core crash in the debate because the Roman Catholic Church is composed of members. Those members should be at the center of the debate. Why would members not benefit? And I get it really. The third speech still runs an analysis, which is that these Roman Catholics are not going to be close to God since they will be disunited. That's a very good impact. But let's now compare. You have to compare specific impact against the impact of the preservation of their culture. Which one is stronger? And that deadlock still is not broken. So even at that specific level, proposition takes that debate. I think those are the three major ones. In case you want analysis on others, I see time is fast spent. I don't want to debate that take 2 hours. On the three most important clashes of the debate, proposition takes those specific clashes. So thank you so much for the debate. See you tomorrow, I guess. If you have any questions on personal feedback, in the box, because I have to end this stream. Yeah.
So thank you, Coach, for the feedback.
Okay. Thank you for coming.